Thus, at various points, an emerging human is a fish, a frog, and finally a fetus.
In the beginning, we were all fish, okay?
What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that behold. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken to sell us secure, we're worthy as we are.
Greetings, cult members, loyal subscribers, and casual viewers alike. In this video, we're going to check out Chapter 6, but first, let's check out some of your comments from the previous video. Jason Henderson writes about Hank Hanegraaff's book so far. All Hank did was like a mixtape. He made a mixtape. There's no original thought, no original material. Him claiming to have written a book would be like a 13-year-old me claiming to have recorded an album because I burned a CD with a bunch of different songs on it that I liked. I think this sums it up. This is probably the most frustrating part of this book is, as you said, there is no original thought. There's nothing that Hank has done to share any of his perspective, why he thinks what he thinks. And again, it's fine that he's not a biologist. It's fine that he is more comfortable speaking about it from a religious perspective, but even his religious perspective is stuff from other religious people, other televangelists, or other apologists. These are not even his own personal religious feelings, or when I learned about this is what I thought, or when I read the Bible, then I compared it to something else that I found in this biology text, and this is why I believe that it's wrong for other Christians to follow, something like that. There's none of that. I think that's what makes this so frustrating compared to the Turek and Giesler book. Giesler? Anyway. I think it's what's really frustrating because as bad as that book was, at least they had some of their own thoughts. Not always all of their own thoughts, but there were some of their own thoughts. So far I haven't found anything from Hank. John Speck 4736 writes, "If I use a match to light a fuse, I believe the amount of fire from the explosion is, quote, quantitatively greater, end quote, and has a, quote, qualitative superiority, end quote, ability to destroy than the fire of the match that caused it." So what John is referring to here comes from something that Hank and other apologists have said as well, that this first cause or creator or originator, whatever you want to call it, basically the creator God, it must be quantitatively greater and qualitatively superior to its creation. And that is such a weird thing to think about because I think I may have given an example in the previous video about something like a video game or AI or something that a person can create and then they perish. And this thing they've created long outlives them, changes in ways that they never expected, and people add to it and it becomes this thing that is a bigger or greater or somehow superior. You know, we have to define what we mean by greater or superior. But if we're talking about things like lifespan, the amount of information that it can hold, the amount of people it can interact with, something like the internet is far greater or far superior than any of the individuals that created it. Does that mean that they are gods? And so this is just a reminder that whatever started the universe is whatever started the universe. It doesn't necessarily have to be greater, superior, timeless, all-powerful, etc. This is some of the stuff that they try to smuggle in, that it must be eternal. It must be omnipresent. And it's just not the case. Stephen Myers says, "Hank would be mesmerized by random gibberish produced by monkeys on typewriters and point out how it must be designed because they could never reproduce the exact gibberish ever again." That's fantastic. That is exactly the problem with what he's saying. The only reason we care about the idea of monkeys producing Shakespeare on a typewriter is because Shakespeare has some kind of meaning to us. But the gibberish that they produce is also unique to that iteration of their attempt. Does that mean it's special? No. Michael Summers 2356 wants to remind us not to forget that gravitation is only a theory. This is something I actually had to describe to my students just last week, that we have laws and we have theories. And the reason we brought this up was because this is an AP psychology class and we have to talk about what is a hypothesis and what is a theory. I will say that because plate tectonics is a theory, I have heard Muslims argue that the Quran is still correct, that mountains are pegs that hold the earth stable, that without them the earth would be wiggly wobbly and have no way to stop it from just bouncing with each human step.
But the words used in these three verses I quoted, it is tamida. Tamida means to shake, to sway, to swing. And Quran says in Surah Luqman chapter 31 verse number 10, as well as Surah Nahl chapter number 16 verse 15, we have put on the earth mountain standing firm lest it would shake with you. It is tamida bikum, shake with you, indicating if the mountains were not there, if you would have walked, if you would have moved, even the earth would have moved with you. If you would have swayed, even the earth would have swayed with you.
So thankful for those mountains, otherwise the earth would shake every time I walked. I'm not sure if there's a fat joke in there, but I'm sure we could figure something out. Bill Morse 5724 mentions the recipe that I brought up. While I couldn't handle the heat personally, a kimchi Reuben sounds like a fascinating and tasty concept. Well, I did make it happen.
Hey guys, good morning. I'm on my way to the airport, but I finally made the kimchi Reuben. I guess it's technically a Rachel because it's not made with corned beef, it's made with pastrami. Anyway, let's give it a go. Oh, that's really good. Oh, why didn't I make this earlier? It's got just the right amount of punch to it. It just adds a little more flavor than the sauerkraut. It's a brilliant combination. Thank you, Hanegraaff.
Michael Summers 2356 adds, not only do creationists lie about cosmology, evolution, and every other science, they also lie about information. They seem to conflate information and meaning. They are not at all the same. If, for example, you have an English sentence and a string of random letters of the same length, the latter, though meaningless, has more information. So this is another issue that we kind of run into where they don't know what the word theory means in science. They don't understand chaos or disorder when they're talking about entropy. It's pretty frustrating because now they think that they're smarter than the people that actually study this for a living. And whenever I feel that way, I first think, maybe I don't understand this as well as I think I do. I should probably learn more about it. And then when I do, I find out, well, that's why I thought it was as simple as XYZ. It's because I didn't know enough about the topic. FMDJ adds, which I totally agree with, to be fair, to this day, nobody understands quantum mechanics. There was a phrase, if somebody claims they understand quantum mechanics or quantum physics, they don't, even if that's what they do for a living. Sam Gott 8689 writes, I think the Einstein quote is a reference to his correspondence with Niels Bohr, where he said, quote, God doesn't play dice with the universe, end quote. The problem is this isn't a theological statement. Einstein rejected the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics and embraced a strictly deterministic model. Tellingly, Bohr responded, quote, stop telling God what to do, end quote. And to make it perfectly clear that they are debating a determined versus probabilistic universe and not theologizing, Niels Bohr was an atheist, and at best you can say Einstein believed in the philosophical God of Spinoza. That means even the goddamn footnote about Einstein reasoning his way to a bare minimum creator God is wrong. Thank you for adding this context. That was one of the things that they being creationists, they kind of don't understand. When scientists are using the phrase God, they don't necessarily mean God. This is something like the God particle. It's more like the Holy Grail, to use even another religious concept. It's not that they're saying, I believe this is the cup of Christ. They're using it as a stand-in for, this is a thing that would be so wonderful for us to find. This would provide some kind of physical evidence to help us understand what we want to get to. And the God particle was actually supposed to be the goddamn particle because it was so hard to find, but they said, well, let's go ahead and just shorten it. That's not the best name for a book. So this is where we get the God particle. It's not saying that God is a particle. It's not saying this particle demonstrates that a creator God exists. It's just the God particle because it was the goddamn particle, and that may not sell as well. Ark Chapman writes, "Oh, amusingly, this quote, God did not have a beginning, end quote, yes he did. The Yahweh of the Israelites isn't the same as the El of Genesis, according to scholars. El had 70 sons, or subsidiary gods, each with a chosen people as their property. That's why Yahweh is the God of the Israelites, of Abraham. He wasn't the God for any other people. It's why he got his people out of slavery under Babylon. They're his toys, no one else gets to play." Very interesting that you brought that up. I've been doing some reading in between all the other stuff I'm trying to do. So it may take a while, but I am doing some reading on the origins of Yahweh, and I would love to share that when I have that all compiled. And we'll end with another one from Ark Chapman, who writes, "Person A, after reading chapter 1. Start with your best material, Hank. This is just terrible. Hank, I did. Person B, who reads further, he's right, he did that. Person A, what do you mean? Person B, he gets worse. Somehow, he always gets worse. Let's find out how much worse it gets." So we have chapter 6, which is our final chapter, thankfully. There is an epilogue. Let me know if you want me to read the epilogue. That's completely up to you. I'll go with whatever you guys want to do. But for chapter 6, the title is Recapitulation. This is the one that I remember the best, probably because of the availability heuristic, so I'm not going to make any predictions because I think I know what we're talking about. But for you guys, feel free to pause this and add your predictions to it. And feel free to type as much as you like. It really helps out the almighty algorithm. You know, that's a good way to help out the channel. If you guys want to join as a member or you want to join on Patreon, that's also awesome as well. But yeah, just commenting, liking, and sharing, that's a really great way to help out for free. Chapter 6, Recapitulation. Recapitulation, better known by the once popular evolutionary phrase ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, is the notion that in the course of an embryo's development, ontogeny, the embryo repeats or recapitulates the evolutionary history of its species, phylogeny. Thus, at various points, an emerging human is a fish, a frog, and finally a fetus.
In the beginning, we were all fish, okay? Swimming around in the water.
We do have a footnote here, and it's from William R. Fix, The Bone Peddlers from 1984. If I remember correctly, this was some kind of anti-evolution book. Yep, there we are. The Bone Peddlers Selling Evolution, and this was first published on April 1st, 1984, which is, yeah, that makes sense. It's just a joke. I will say I'm really disappointed that The Bone Peddlers as a title with this font has to be about something as lame as this, because this would have made like a really cool occult book, right? This would have been, I mean, even something Christian like the Satanic Panic, this would have been a better option for the title. I don't know, I feel like if I would have purchased this pre-internet, just at a bookstore or rented it from the library, I feel like I would have been very disappointed. Well, then again, I was Christian back then, so maybe not. This theory, first championed by a German biologist named Ernst Haeckel, is not only based on revisionism, but has also been used as justification for Roe v. Wade and for racism. Now, there is no footnote, so I do wonder. Well, thank you, Google, and our AI overlords for this AI overview. It just mentions that it was not used basically because the argument in Roe versus Wade was this idea about the legal and ethical definition of a human as opposed to the biological definition of a human and fetal development, which, if, you know, that makes sense because the idea of abortion being available, that would include when, according to whatever Hank is going to say and what Ernst was thinking, even after it gets to the fetal point of human, so after it goes through the gills and everything else, the fish, the frog, and the fetus, right? We get to the human fetus, and at that point it can still be aborted. So the idea that, oh, this would be used as an argument to create abortion really doesn't make sense, because abortion for the human, quote-unquote, timeline in fetal development would still be an option. I did find something, though, about the historical context, and that it was rejected in the by the scientific community in the 20th century, a little bit later in the 20th century, and this was from a book written by Stephen Jay Gould. And if we check out the book, it was actually written in 1985. So this is something that hopefully Hank would have looked at, but of course he didn't. And we get this comment right at the beginning. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny was Haeckel's answer, the wrong one, to the most vexing question of the 19th century biology. What is the relationship between individual development, or ontogeny, and the evolution of species and lineages, phylogeny? In this, the first major book on the subject in 50 years, Stephen Jay Gould documents the history of the idea of recapitulation from its first appearance among pre-Socratics to its fall in the early 20th century. Mr. Gould explores recapitulation as an idea that intrigued politicians and theologians as well as scientists. He shows that Haeckel's hypothesis, that human fetuses with gill slits are literally tiny fish, exact replicas of their water-breathing ancestors, had an influence that extended beyond biology into education, criminology, psychoanalysis. Freud and Jung were devout recapitulationists, and racism. The theory of recapitulation, Gould argues, finally collapsed not from the weight of contrary data, but because of the rise of Mendelian genetics rendered it untenable. Turning to modern concepts, Gould demonstrates that even though the whole subject of parallels between ontogeny and phylogeny fell into disrepute, it is still one of the great themes of evolutionary biology. Heterochrony, changes in developmental timing, producing parallels between ontogeny and phylogeny, is shown to be crucial to the understanding of gene regulation, the key to any rapprochement between molecular and evolutionary biology. Gould argues that primary evolutionary value of heterochrony may lie in immediate ecological advantage for slow or rapid maturation, rather than in long-term changes of form, as all previous theories proclaimed. Neoteny, the opposite of recapitulation, is shown to be the most important determinant of human evolution. We have evolved by retaining juvenile characteristics of our ancestors and have achieved both behavioral flexibility and our characteristic morphology thereby. Large brains by prolonged retention of rapid fetal growth rates, for example. Gould concludes that, quote, there may be nothing new under the sun, but permutation of the old within complex systems can do wonders. As biologists, we deal directly with the kind of material complexity that confers an unbounded potential upon simple, continuous changes in underlying processes. This is the chief joy of our science, end quote. So again, this book is from 1985, and Hank's book is from the 2000s, which means that anytime Hank is going to argue that this is very detrimental, it causes all these problems, etc., this would only apply to the 19th century and early 20th century, and nothing that would apply to any contemporaries of Hank, which means it shouldn't even be included. I mean, Hank's not writing a history book, he's trying to explain why evolution is wrong, and it's a farce. So I'm not sure how bringing up some scientists in the 19th century use this mistaken hypothesis to do a thing. I'm not sure how that means evolution itself is a farce. Let's find out. Revisionism. In Ontogeny and Phylogeny, Harvard professor Stephen Jay Gould points out that German scientist Wilhelm His exposed such shocking dishonesty on the part of Ernst Haeckel that it rendered him unworthy, quote, to be counted as a peer in the company of earnest researchers, end quote. Okay, so at least he does quote Stephen Jay Gould. Let's see where this comes from. So this quote is from Stephen Jay Gould. This is from 1977, so too bad he didn't read something a little more modern. And we also get whatever he's going to say in the next sentence. The footnote here is also from that book on the back cover. While admitting that the problems with Haeckel's recapitulation theory are myriad, Gould says he does not want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I'm aware that I treat the subject currently unpopular. I am aware that I treat a subject currently unpopular. I do so, first of all, simply because it has fascinated me ever since New York City public schools taught me Haeckel's doctrine, that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, 50 years after it had been abandoned by science. Yet I am not so detached a scholar that I would pursue it for the vanity of personal interest alone. I would not have spent some of the best years of scientific career upon it, were I not convinced that it should be as important today as it ever has been. I am also not so courageous a scientist that I would have risked so much effort against a wall of truly universal opprobrium. But the chinks in the wall surfaced as soon as I probed. There we have it again, where they type in the hyphen. Because I suppose on the back of the book where this came from, it was separated on a different line, but I don't understand why he being Hank, writes SUR dash space FACED. As soon as I probed, I have had the same most curious experience more than 20 times. I tell a colleague that I'm writing a book about parallels between ontogeny and phylogeny. He takes me aside, makes sure that no one's looking, checks for bugging devices, and admits in markedly lowered voice, just between you and me and that wall. I think there is really something to it after all. The clothing of disrepute is diaphanous before it is any good naturalist experience. I feel like the honest little boy before the naked emperor. I began this book as an indulgent antiquarian exercise in personal interest. I hoped, at best, to retrieve from its current limbo the ancient subject of parallels between ontogeny and phylogeny, and a rescue it certainly deserves, for no discarded theme more clearly merits the old metaphor about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Haeckel's biogenetic law was so extreme, and its collapse so spectacular, that the subject became taboo. But I soon decided that this subject needs no apology. Properly restructured, it stands a contemporary theme in evolutionary biology because it illuminates two issues of great contemporary importance: the evolution of ecological strategies and the biology of regulation. That some relationship between ontogeny and phylogeny exists cannot be denied. Evolutionary changes must be expressed in ontogeny, and phyletic information must therefore reside in the development of individuals. This in itself is obvious and unenlightening. This book emphasizes the importance of one kind of relationship, the changes in developmental timing that produce parallels between the stages of ontogeny and phylogeny. So, to me, when I read this, it's just saying that Gould was interested in finding out, is there anything useful that we can get out of this? Do we have to abandon it completely? And no, it says it does seem to produce parallels in the stages of ontogeny and phylogeny, as in it looks similar. It doesn't mean it is similar. And as we read from the other book that I read the review and also the quote from Stephen Jay Gould at the end, he is saying that it's interesting, but really what we're looking for is something else. And okay, I don't know why, when there was a more recent book, Hank is choosing the previous book from Stephen Jay Gould. Well, we do know why, don't we? Because this is the one that for him is easier to twist. So let's see what sentence this applies to. Tragically, despite acknowledging that the recapitulation theory has been discredited, Gould proceeded to write an entire book to demonstrate that it is still one of the great themes of evolutionary biology. Well, Hank, tragically, despite acknowledging that not everybody believes XYZ, you still decided to include pieces of that, such as Piltdown Man. On the screen, if you guys aren't looking, we do have a comparison, figure A and figure B, and it says Haeckel utilized deceptive data as well as doctored drawings to delude devotees. We get Hank again thinking he's a wordsmith because of his alliteration. These doctored drawings designed to demonstrate the similarity between dog and human, dog being figure A and human being figure B. Embryos were originally featured in Natural History of Creation 1868. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hank, for having modern science, contemporary science used in your book. Sir Gavin De Beer of the British Natural History Museum was more circumspect. He was quoted as saying, quote, "Seldom has an assertion like that of Haeckel's theory of recapitulation, facile, tidy, and plausible, widely accepted without critical examination, done so much harm to science." We have another footnote. Ian T. Taylor in The Minds of Men. This is from 1991, so it's probably as recent as we're going to get. We also get more from Taylor, who writes, Haeckel stated that the ova and embryos of different vertebrate animals and man are, at certain periods in their development, all perfectly alike, indicating their supposed common origin. Haeckel produced the well-known illustration showing embryos at several stages of development. In this, he had to play fast and loose with the facts by altering several drawings in order to make them appear more alike and conform to the theory. In a catalog of errors, his showed that Haeckel used two drawings of embryos, one taken from Bischoff and the other from Ecker, and that he added 3 to 5 millimeters to the size of the head of Bischoff's dog embryo, taken 2 millimeters off the head of Ecker's human embryo, reduced the size of the eye at 5 millimeters, and doubled the length of the posterior. And that is going to refer to this sentence. Haeckel not only utilized deceptive data, but also doctored drawings to delude his devotees. So this is bizarre. So, number one, we get that doc dash space toward. I don't know why he writes it this way. This is so bizarre. And then the other thing that's weird is that he just wrote that as a comment associated with the figure. So he put Haeckel utilized deceptive data as well as doctor drawings to delude devotees, and then he writes it again that he not only utilized deceptive data but also doctor drawings to delude his devotees. So I don't know why he's so repetitive. I mean, I get that the whole book is very repetitive because he's just repeating what other people have said, but he's got to repeat what he said as well. Did he think that he had some kind of character limit that he was trying to reach? There was, what, if they're not going to print the book if I don't have a minimum number of characters or words? Come on. His dishonesty was so blatant that he was charged with fraud by 5 professors and convicted by a university court at, I'm assuming, Jena? This is number 6, Walt Brown, in the beginning, compelling evidence for creation and the flood. Oh, well, we don't care about that. Because, I mean, if it's a true statement about him being convicted of something, I don't know, pull up some kind of court document. His forgeries were subsequently made public with the 1911 publication of Haeckel's Frauds and Forgeries. Okay, so he knows that this is as old as 1911. People understood this was a fraud. He also noticed that people are pointing out Haeckel's deceptive practices. And this was early on that these were pointed out by other scientists. It wasn't like they just showed it to people and somebody that was in the church, that was, I don't know, somebody that was in the choir said, wait a minute, I know all of these drawings myself in and out, and I can tell that he changed the These are other scientists that are doing it. So this is another example of Hank following scientists when it suits him and then poo-pooing on scientists when it doesn't. So is science evil? Is it not evil? This is... I mean, the fact that this comes to light because of other scientists shows how well the process works. How does Hank not see this? So we got the footnote. The footnote is from Asmuth and Hall, Haeckel's Frauds and Forgeries, 1911, cited in Luther D. Sutherland's Darwin's Enigma, 1988. So again, we're not even reading the original, we're just reading somebody else quoting it. Fantastic. Lazy. Today, the recapitulations most commonly referred to by educators and evolutionists are gill slits in the fish stage of human embryonic growth. Dr. Henry Morris notes several reasons why the supposed recapitulation is entirely superficial. Well, so does Stephen Jay Gould in that book that Hank didn't read. First, the human embryo never at any time develops gill slits and therefore never goes through a fish stage. Furthermore, a fetus does not have fins or any other fish structures. Finally, every stage in the development of an embryo plays a crucial role in embryonic growth. Thus, there's no redundant vestiges of former evolutionary phases. Does Hank not understand that that's how that works? That the things that we start with can still do a different function in the future, in like future speciation? Does he? No, he doesn't, does he? He thinks that we're going to be walking around with like partial fins sticking off of our shoulder or something. That's what he thinks evolutionists think. What do we got here for the footnote? From Henry M. Morris, Scientific Creationism, Public School Edition, 1981. Although Haeckel's frauds and forgeries were exposed more than half a century ago, modern studies in molecular genetics have further demonstrated the utter absurdity of the recapitulation theory, which is what that other book that we found from Stephen Jay Gould said. The DNA for a fetus is not the DNA for a frog, and the DNA for a frog is not the DNA for a fish. Rather, the DNA of a fetus, frog, fish, or falcon, for that matter, is uniquely programmed for reproduction after its own kind. I like how they use that phrase, that creationist phrase. We see here, this also comes from Morris for more detail concerning alleged evolutionary vestiges and recapitulations. Incredibly, such facts have not stopped men like Carl Sagan from affirming recapitulation. Fully aware that it had gone through various cycles of scholarly acceptance and rejection, Sagan wrote, Haeckel held that in its embryological development, an animal tends to repeat or recapitulate the sequence that its ancestors followed during the revolution. And indeed, in human intrauterine development, we run through stages very much like fish, reptiles, and non-primate mammals before we become recognizably human. The fish stage even has gill slits, which are absolutely useless for the embryo who is nourished via the umbilical cord, but a necessity for human embryology. Since gills were vital to our ancestors, we run through a gill stage in becoming human. Now, the quote here or the footnote here I happen to see just goes to his book, but I do wonder if this is pulled out of context. I was curious for some more context, so I actually did find the book The Dragons of Eden by Carl Sagan, and this is on Internet Archive. I'll put a link to that in the details section below, and you can just read the entire book. So it's talking about this, the brain and its development. And so the part that is cut out is first the beginning and then the ending of this long paragraph. So here's the beginning of it. It is very difficult to evolve by altering the deep fabric of life. Any change there is likely to be lethal, but fundamental change can be accomplished by the addition of new systems on top of old ones. This is reminiscent of a doctrine in which is called Recapitulation by Ernest Haeckel, a 19th century, and this is where it gets into that quote that Hank included. Before we get recognizably human, all right, so we go through stages very much like fish, reptiles, and non-primate mammals before we become recognizably human. The fish stage even has gill slits, which are absolutely useless for the embryo who is nourished via the umbilical cord, but a necessity for human embryology. Since gills were vital to our ancestors, we run through a gill stage in becoming human. The brain of a human fetus also develops from the inside out, and roughly speaking, runs through the sequence neurochassis, R complex, limbic system, and neocortex. The reason for recapitulation may be understood as follows. Natural selection operates only on individuals, not on species, and not very much on eggs or fetuses. Thus, the latest evolutionary changes appear postpartum. The fetus may have characteristics like the gill slits in mammals that are so entirely maladaptive after birth, but as long as they cause no serious problems for the fetus and are lost before birth, they can be retained. Our gill slits are vestiges not of ancient fish, but of ancient fish embryos. Many new organ systems develop not by the addition and preservation, but by the modification of older systems, as, for example, the modification of fins to legs, and legs to flippers or wings, and feet to hands to feet, or sebaceous glands to mammary glands, or gill arches to ear bones, or shark scales to shark teeth. Thus, evolution by addition and by functional preservation of the pre-existing structure must occur for one of two reasons. Either the old function is required as well as a new one, or there is no way of bypassing the old system that is consistent with survival. Now, one thing I remember, at least I think I remember from the book, is that they mentioned these gill slits become bones in the neck. And so the thing that even just reading what was said in Hank's book, this quote that was pulled out from this book here, The Dragons of Eden, Carl Sagan isn't saying we do have gills, he's saying we do have the appearance of this, but obviously if you just continue reading, it just explains this is why those stay there, and they're just kind of repurposed later on. This idea, of course, is not science, it's science fiction. For more than a century, it's been well known that what Sagan refers to as gill slits are really essential parts of human anatomy. Far from being useless evolutionary vestiges, they are axiomatic to the development of a human embryo. Now, even in the quote that he pulled out here, it doesn't say that they are useless to human anatomy. It's just saying that gills are not needed for a human embryo because everything that they need comes through the umbilical cord. But let's see what the footnote says. The throat or pharyngeal grooves and pouches, falsely called gill slits, are not mistakes in human development. Well, it doesn't say that they're mistakes if he continued reading. They develop into absolutely essential parts of human anatomy. The middle ear canals come from the second pouches, and the parathyroid and thymus glands come from the third and fourth. Without a thymus, we would lose half our immune systems. Without the parathyroids, we would be unable to regulate calcium balance and could not even survive. Another pouch, thought to be vestigial by evolutionists until just recently, becomes a gland that assists in calcium balance. And this is also from Morris, What is Creation Science? Now, if you notice, a lot of times Hank will say, this was Carl Sagan's book, blah, 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 as quoted in, and then it's some creationist book that he read. However, in this case, it doesn't say that. It just says Carl Sagan, The Dragons of Eden, New York, Random House, 1977, pages 57 to 58. Now, we just read pages 57 and 58. So this would mean that Hank actually read the book, knows full well that Carl Sagan says what we read and what he's trying to argue here, that Carl Sagan is wrong because these are not useless, they don't disappear, they become ear bones. That's what he said, that's what we read. So what happened here, Hank? Did somebody recommend that you just read these pages and you only read it so you could quote mine, and then you just threw the book away or burned it or whatever? That's a bit incendiary, isn't it? Burning books. But are you to tell us that on page 58, which we read together, that Hank should have read, because he says he also got it from page 58, it's in the very next paragraph that explains what all these pieces, including the so-called gill slits, or the appearance of gill slits. That's what these are for, and that's what they develop into. And did Hank just not read this? So the next two things that he's going to be using for footnotes, those also come from the same book. Roe v. Wade. In The Dragons of Eden, Sagan stated that determining when a fetus becomes human could play a major role in achieving an acceptable compromise in the abortion debate. In his estimation, the transition from human or to human would fall towards the end of the first trimester or near the beginning of the second trimester of pregnancy. Now, so it looks like 197, so let's see. So the abortion discussion starts back in, looks like the page 195, and it's talking about how, New York newborn babies don't survive without help and so on. On the opposite side of the discussion, the phrase right to life is an excellent example of a buzzword designed to inflame rather than illuminate. There is no right to life in any society on earth today, nor has there been any in the former time, with a few rare exceptions, such as among the Jains of India. We raise farm animals for slaughter, destroy forests, pollute rivers and lakes until no fish can live there, hunt deer and elk for sport, leopards for their pelts, and whales for dog food. Entwine dolphins, gasping and writhing in great tuna nets, and club seal pups to death for population management. All these beasts and vegetables are as alive as we. What is protected in many human societies is not life, but human life. And even with this protection, we wage modern wars on civilian populations with a toll so terrible we are, most of us, afraid to consider it very deeply. Often such mass murders are justified by racial or nationalistic redefinitions of our opponents as less than human. In the same way, the argument about the potential to be human seems to me particularly weak. Any human egg or sperm, under appropriate circumstances, has the potential to become a human being, yet male masturbation and nocturnal emissions are generally considered natural acts and not cause for murder indictments. In a single ejaculation, there's enough spermatozoa for the generation of hundreds of millions of human beings. In addition, it is possible that the not-too-distant future we may be able to clone a whole human being from a single cell taken from essentially anywhere in the donor's body. If so, any cell in my body has the potential to become a human being if properly preserved until the time of a practical cloning technology. Am I committing mass murder if I prick my finger and lose a drop of blood? These issues are clearly complex. The solution, equally clearly, must involve some kind of compromise among a number of cherished but conflicting values. The key practical question is to determine when a fetus becomes a human. This in turn rests on what we mean by human. Surely not having a human shape, because an artifact of organic materials that resembled a human being but was constructed for the purpose would certainly not be considered human. Likewise, an extraterrestrial intelligent being who did not resemble human beings but who had ethical, intellectual, and artistic accomplishments exceeding our own should certainly fall within our prohibitions against murder. It is not what we look like that specifies our humanity, but what we are. The reason we prohibit the killing of human beings must be because of some quality human beings possess, a quality we especially prize, that few or no other organisms on earth enjoy. It cannot be the ability to feel pain or deep emotions, because that surely extends to many of the animals we gratuitously slaughter. This essential human quality, I believe, can only be our intelligence. If so, the particular sanctity of human life can be identified with the development and functioning of the neocortex. We cannot require its full development, because that does not occur until many years after birth. But perhaps we might set the transition to humanity at a time when the neocortical activity begins, as determined by electroencephalography of the fetus. Some insights on when the brain develops a distinctly human character emerge from the simplest embryological observations. Very little work has been done in this field to date, and it seems to me that such investigation could play a major role in achieving an acceptable compromise in the abortion debate. Undoubtedly, there would be a variation from fetus to fetus as to the time of the initiation of the first neocortical EEG signals, and a legal definition of the beginning of characteristically human life should be biased conservatively, that is, towards the youngest fetus that exhibits such activity. Perhaps the transition would fall toward the end of the first trimester or near the beginning of the second trimester of pregnancy. Here we are talking about what in a rational society should be prohibited by law. Anyone who feels that the abortion of a younger fetus might be murder should be under no legal obligations to perform or accept such an abortion. Now this is a completely different discussion, isn't it? The way that Hank makes it sound is that because Sagan mention this thing that he pulls out, I would say quote mined, about gills, is that it's okay to terminate the pregnancy because it's not human, because of the gills, because of the frog legs, because of whatever else that he's going to say. But really he's saying what makes us human, what sets us apart. It's intelligence. So what about when we're talking about the development of the part of the brain that we associate with intelligence? That seems to me to be a good legal definition if that's the thing we value. But of course, if you disagree and you think that conception is when it starts, then you should be under no obligation to have or perform an abortion. Very different than what Hank is presenting, isn't it? My goodness. My goodness. Shortly before he died, I watched him reiterate this odd predilection. Using recapitulation as the pretext, he shamelessly defended the painful killing of innocent human beings. Where? No, oh, okay. This is not cited. He's got no footnotes here. So he's just saying that Carl Sagan was in favor of murdering people. He's just saying this. Wow. Without so much as blushing, he communicated his contention that a first trimester abortion does not constitute the painful killing of a human fetus, but merely the termination of a fish or frog. This is, again, he's not even citing anything because he knows he's lying. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. He's just lying. Wow. It's so sad because the stuff that we just read from Carl Sagan's book is so well thought. It's so specifically worded. It's so contemplative. And then we get this bull in a china shop, first grade understanding, wild child running around screaming some nonsense that is Hank. It's really upsetting to see this. Thus, in Sagan's world, Roe v. Wade provided the legal framework for the slaughter of multiplied millions of creatures rather than children. So again, this is not at all what he says. Popular evolutionist Dr. Carl Sagan uses recapitulation as the pretext for communicating that a first trimester abortion does not constitute the painful killing of a human fetus, but rather the termination of a fish or frog. And again, it's not at all what he said. And I haven't read the whole book. I will now, but I haven't read the whole book. I was just reading the pages that Hank said that he also read. How can Hank read this and come to that conclusion that he's saying, oh, it's just a fish or frog, it's totally fine? Sagan was not alone in his rationalization for abortion. His appeal to the science fiction of capitulation is common fare. Curtin Windsor Jr., the ambassador to Costa Rica, provides a classic case in point. In response to After Roe, an article written in the National Review by Father Richard John Neuhaus, Ambassador Windsor, with sarcasm dripping from his pen, wrote, "If our well-meaning preacher has studied fetal anatomy, he might recall that the developing fetus actually retraces the evolutionary process. In a period of a few weeks, it begins as a single-celled creature and grows to be a fish with gills, an amphibian, a reptile, and a mammal with a tail. Yes, at all times, this fetus has human potential, but that potential is implicit, not explicit, until around the 12th week of pregnancy, when it manifests its human reality." And this is, again, Ambassador Curtin Windsor, letter to the editor, National Review. Why are we checking, again, 1989, some ambassador instead of an actual biologist? So, fantastic. You got a guy who has as poor of a grasp on science as you do, just in the opposite direction. Great. Fantastic, Hank. Ambassador Windsor goes on to point out that recapitulation is a, quote, reasonable basis upon which critical distinctions can be made in law, end quote. He specifically names, quote, the law deriving from Roe v. Wade, which gives the unwilling mother the benefit of the doubt, at least until her fetus is explicitly human. What do you mean the unwilling mother? Who was forcing abortions in 1989? Well, unless you were First Nations, right? And this again comes from the letter to the editor. A similar example of incomprehensible ignorance in the age of scientific enlightenment is found in the words of Hank Hanegraaff. No, sorry, he doesn't quote himself. Is found in the words of Ellie Schnauer, director of Biosystems Research Institute in La Jolla, California, and chairman of the Southern California Skeptic Society. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. This is a fundamental tenet of modern biology that derives from evolutionary theory and is thus anathema to creationism, as well as to those opposed to freedom of choice. Ontogeny is the name for the process of the development of a fertilized egg into a fully formed and mature living organism. Phylogeny, on the other hand, is the history of the evolution of a species, in this case a human being. During development, the fertilized egg progresses over 38 weeks through what is, in fact, a rapid passage through evolutionary history. From a single primordial cell, the conceptus progresses through being something of a protozoan, a fish, a reptile, a bird, a primate, and ultimately a human being, which we are primates. There is a difference of opinion among scientists about the time during a pregnancy when a human can be said to emerge, but there is a general agreement that this does not happen until the end of the first trimester. Now, I emphasized something of a protozoan, a fish, a reptile. I don't think Hank understands the difference when someone says it is like versus it is. That's where he seems to be misunderstanding, and I don't know if that's intentional. I don't know if that's just he doesn't understand anything. As quoted in Morris, the long war against God. Okay, fantastic. And this is 1985, in the words of he's the director of Biosystems Research Institute. Now, at the time that Hank wrote this book, was he the director of Biosystems Research Institute? Because the way he phrases this makes it sound like this is a currently believed thing. And this guy who's currently in the 2000s, the director, this is what he's saying. But this really comes from 1989, which he didn't even read because he read it quoted in somebody else's book. Schnauer, of course, is dead wrong. The notion that there is a general agreement among scientists that a human being does not emerge during a pregnancy until after the end of the first trimester is merely the figment of a rather fertile imagination. While an emerging embryo may not fully have developed personality, it does have full personhood from the moment of conception. None of this has a footnote. French geneticist Jerome L. Lejeune bore eloquent testimony to this truth while testifying to a United States Senate subcommittee. Quote, "To accept the fact that after fertilization has taken place, a new human has come into being is no longer a matter of taste or opinion. The human nature of the human being from conception to old age is not a metaphysical contention, it is plain experimental evidence," end quote. So again, he finds a geneticist who says something that the rest of the scientists or biologists specifically are not saying, and he's going to side with that because it just goes with whatever he's already believing. This is the Human Life Bill hearings before subcommittee, blah, 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 1981, as quoted in Norman Geisler, Christian Ethics, cited in Francis J. Beckwith. Oh, wow. Wow. So there's a Christian book about abortion that cited Norm's comments about somebody else's statement. So this is a quote of a quote. Wow. Again, Hank, if you're too lazy to read the source material, don't write a book about it. Because you don't know what you're writing. That's the worst part. He doesn't even know what he's writing about. But then again, he claims to have read the book by Carl Sagan, and he still can't get it right. Dr. Jaime Gordon, professor of medical genetics and a physician at the prestigious Mayo Clinic, best summarized the perspective of science as follows. I think we can now say that the question of the beginning of life, when life begins, is no longer a question for theological or philosophical dispute. It is an established scientific fact. Theologians and philosophers may go on to debate the meaning of life or purpose of life, but it is an established fact that all life, including human life, begins at the moment of conception. And this is also from the same source as quoted by Francis J. Beckwith in that Christian book about abortion rights. While I could not find exactly where this came from, I did find it cited in another text, and this is Balancing Abortion Rights and Fetal Rights, a Mixed Methods Mediation of the U.S. Abortion Debate. This is found on page 232 going into 233. And so on page 232, this is when we get another medical school professor testified. I think we can now say the question of the beginning of life and so on, which is what Hank quoted. And then on the next page, it says that professor, the one that we're talking about that gave us the quote, testified that it was the only possible biological view. Quote, I have never ever seen in my own scientific reading, long before I became concerned with issues of life in this nature, that anyone has ever argued that life did not begin at the moment of conception and that it was a human conception if it resulted from the fertilization of a human egg by human sperm. As far as I know, these have never been argued against, end quote. And that, of course, is ridiculous. Because the whole thing that Hank has said so far is look at all of these scientists who are saying life doesn't begin at conception. And then the one guy that he's quoting that says it does begin at conception is saying, I've never read that anybody argued that life doesn't begin at conception. All the other scientific writing or writing that I've read, all of it says human life begins at conception. So which is it, Hank? Is it that all these scientists that you're citing, that they are saying that there's ambiguity when a fetus can be legally considered human, or is it that the guy that you quoted in a positive way, is he correct in saying that this scientific reading doesn't exist, and if it does, he certainly has never read it? Was he just not privy to Hank's book? You'll have this again in the details section below. And this one comes from 2019. I haven't read all of it. I don't know what it's about. I just thought it was very interesting that the same person that Hank positively quotes also says something that's goes against the rest of this chapter that Hank has given us. Recapitulation, of course, is just one of the many arguments that have been used in the justification for the atrocities that have resulted from Roe v. Wade. In light of both scientific and scriptural evidence that abortion is a painful killing of a human innocent being, I've developed the acronym ABORTION as a memorable tool to equip you and deal effectively with these arguments. This resource can be found in Appendix D, Annihilating Abortion Arguments. You know what? I don't even believe that he developed this, right? And the scriptural evidence that abortion is painful killing. Okay, so when God said to go kill the children, happy is he who dashes the little ones on the rocks, and so on. Kill all women who have known a man, murder children, killing pregnant women. All of that's totally okay, because God ordered it. All right. Racism. Roe v. Wade is not the only ghastly consequence of the recapitulation theory. Racism is another. This point is amplified by none other than Stephen Jay Gould, who notes that the recapitulation served as a basis for Dr. Down in labeling Down syndrome as Mongoloid idiocy because he thought it represented a throwback to the Mongolian stage in evolution. And this is from Morris and Parker. See, Stephen, so it's again something that was pulled out and quoted. Are any of these newer? Okay, the newest one we have is 1997. The rest of these come from Morris, which is the guy he likes, as quoted, cited in Morris, as quoted in Morris, some comment that he has for footnote 27, which we'll actually read when we get there, the meaning of evolution, and the firing line debate. Okay, so we'll check out the last three. The rest of these are just, this is where he got it from. Tragically, as Gould points out, the term Mongoloid was first applied to mentally defective people because it was then commonly believed that the Mongoloid race had not yet evolved to the status of the Caucasian race. Dr. Henry Morris underscores the horror of this racist notion by noting that recapitulationists not only believe that human embryos recapitulate the evolutionary history of the ancestors, but some, like Haeckel and his disciple Adolf Hitler, used to justify the myth of the Aryan super race destined to subjugate or obliterate other races, yet which was a Christian belief. In their view, a Caucasian human infant had to develop through the stages corresponding to the lower human races, hence the origin of the term Mongolism, before becoming a full-fledged member of the master race. So we're not even looking this up because the video is getting pretty long, but we have read multiple times that we can see this is just misquoted, pulled out of context, and Hank is not, he's either lying or he's too stupid to understand how to read the rest of the quote. I don't know what else to say. We saw that even the guy that he quoted in favor of what he's trying to say argues against the rest of this section of the chapter. It's so bizarre. He has no idea what he's talking about. And again, even if this was true, even if, that doesn't mean it's something that people believe, number one, today. That also doesn't mean that it was ever correct. And that underscores the need for the repeat portion of scientific research, that the scientific method works. That's all this is saying. It's saying some ideas are bad and they take prominence in some bad people, but we can always go back to the science and show those people are factually incorrect. That's all that we're getting out of this. Somehow Hank is turning this into science is racist? But a chosen people, that's not racist, right? No, of course not. Only 144,000 from the 12 tribes of Israel get to go to heaven. That's not racist, right? Okay. The image that we have is, it looks like a young man who has Down syndrome. And it says, Dr. Down believes Down syndrome represented the throwback. This, again, I don't know why he keeps repeating himself in these. Does he not know that when you include a figure or an image, you're supposed to provide additional information? Hank doesn't know that. Hank doesn't know how to write. He thinks that, like was mentioned from the one of the comments read earlier in the video, he thinks that making a mixtape is the same thing as making an album. It's incredible to think that, in light of such evidence, evolutionists such as Windsor, an American ambassador, Sagan, a successful scientist, and Schnauer, the chairman of a skeptic society, would champion recapitulation. So again, this is all just incorrect. It is equally amazing I guess that's why it's so shocking, because it's not true. It's equally amazing to realize that Henry Fairfield Osborn, the leading American paleontologist of the first half of the 20th century, had the temerity to say the Negroid stock is even more ancient than the Caucasian and the Mongolian. The standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of an 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapiens. So again, this comes from Morris. So Morris is the one picking out all of these little quotes, which we have no idea what this is actually saying. It could be that Henry Fairfield Osborn is quoting someone else. He could be quoting a pastor, for all we know, and then going on to explain why that is incorrect and why science can show that's incorrect. But because Morris is also dishonest, and so is Hank, they're going to be misquoting it to make it seem like, oh, this scientist is racist. And again, even if it was true, there's no evidence to support it. Just because a person says a thing and that person is a scientist does not somehow mean that this is science. That's the other problem. Creationists can only be grateful that Gould has not followed suit. In an article titled Dr. Down's Syndrome, he decries recapitulation's responsibility for racism in the post-Darwinian era, again from Morris. In his words, recapitulation provided a convenient focus for the pervasive racism of white scientists. They looked to the activities of their own children for comparison with normal adult behaviors in lower races. And this is end quote. Sadly, although Gould has abandoned recapitulation, okay, so glad he read that. He has not abandoned evolution. Instead, he pitifully attempts to prop up the crumbling edifice of evolution with novel notions such as punctuated equilibrium. It's one thing to blame Gould for evolution. It's quite another to blame God. What? I mean, I know that Hank wrote that thinking he had a big zinger. Am I just so thoroughly frustrated and brain fogged from this terrible writing that I don't see the genius that this is? What do you mean it's one thing to blame Gould for evolution? Gould didn't propose evolution. And nobody's blaming God. What do you mean it's quite another to blame God? So I guess this is the next section, Theistic Evolution. All right. Under the banner of Theistic Evolution, a growing number of Christians maintain that God used evolution as his method for creation. Well, it wouldn't be for creation, it would be for evolution. Okay. This, in my estimation, is the worst of all possibilities. Okay, I see. So this is where we're blaming God. So it's a segue. Okay. Sorry, Hank. It is one thing to believe in evolution, it's quite another to blame God for it. Not only is theistic evolution a contradiction in terms, like the phrase flaming snowflakes, but as we've seen, it's also the cruelest, most inefficient system for creation imaginable. Yeah, it's better to just create people bad and then punish them for being bad. Killing them by flooding everything, right? Including, other animals and plants and all of that. That's better. That's better. And sacrificing yourself in a human body to undergo all of these really painful, torturous things, yeah, that's not cruel or inefficient of a system for forgiveness, is it, Hank? Come on. As Jacques Monod puts it, natural selection is the blindest and most cruel way of evolving a new species, ellipses. The struggle for life and elimination of the weakest is a horrible process against which our whole modern ethic revolts, ellipses. I am surprised that a Christian would defend the idea that this is the process which God more or less set up in order to have evolution. This also will come from Morris. So you're saying it's better that God deliberately created parasites that kill humans and other animals? That's better? Okay. Yeah, survival of the fittest is worse than God deliberately creating this to happen. Okay. An omnipotent, omniscient God does not have to painfully plod through millions of mistakes. Okay, God regretted his creation and flooded it. Misfits and mutations in order to have fellowship with humans. Rather, he can create humans in a microsecond. Okay, and that fellowship that he had was also flawed by his own design. So, fantastic. I like how he's saying, like, these Christians are wrong because Christian reasons, and those Christian reasons don't even stand up to reasoning. If theistic evolution is true, Genesis is at best an allegory and at worst a farce. And if Genesis is an allegory or a farce, the rest of the Bible becomes irrelevant. And this is something that creationists are really big on. This is why Hank writes a book like this, because for him, I think he's really just trying to reach the theistic evolutionists. If Adam did not eat the forbidden fruit and fall into a life of constant sin, terminated by death, there is no need for redemption. This is our checking of the non-Morris footnote. Furthermore, the entire evolutionary program is driven by naturalistic assumptions, not theistic ones. There is no point in invoking God to account for a process in which his presence is a priori not needed. Well, no, I disagree completely, because evolution is evolution, it's not creation. This is where a lot of Christians say, yeah, God created and then things adapted. G. Richard Bozarth was right. Christianity must be, totally committed to special creation as described in Genesis, and Christianity must fight with its full might, fair or foul, against the theory of evolution. I like how he added fair or foul. And this just comes from A Meaning of Evolution, American Atheist, page 19, 1978. He was wrong, however, in saying Christianity was fighting for its life. Quite the opposite is true. Evolutionism is fighting for its life. Rather than prop it up with theories like theistic evolution, Christians must be on the vanguard of demonstrating its demise. Darwinism today is much the same condition as Marxism was before its collapse. Its terminal condition cannot be successfully treated with medieval medications such as pseudosores and punctuated equilibrium. As the Soviet Union collapsed before our very eyes, so too the propped-up corpse of evolution is ready for its final fall. As mathematician Dr. David Berlinski eloquently satirized, Darwin's theory of evolution is the last of the great 19th century mystery religions, and, as we speak, it is now following Freudianism and Marxism into the nether regions. And I'm quite sure that Freud, Marx, and Darwin are commiserating one with the other in the dark dungeon where the discarded gods gather. And this comes from David Berlinski, A Firing Line Debate with William F. Buckley, Jr. This is a broadcast. While insiders in the evolutionary community are aware of their theory's desperate condition, the general public is as yet in the dark. That's precisely where you and I come in. We have the inestimable privilege to share the news that nothing could be more compelling in the age of scientific enlightenment than, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Where did you make the argument for that, Hank? So, what we're left with is that if Hank is correct, which he's not, for all the reasons that we went over in this video and the previous, but if Hank was correct, this does not give us, therefore, Hank's Christian version of creationism is correct. But that's where he leaves us. He thinks that he really just ended this really well. Like, obviously, this is the only other option. There's nothing else that it could be other than Genesis 1:1 through my particular lens as the type of Christian that I am. And that's it. I mean, that's really the end here, isn't it? It's just a bunch of nuh-uh. Great job, Hank. Anything else that we're missing? The Apostle Paul, since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. That's it. Normally, remember, he includes some kind of scientist and then some religious quote, particularly from the Bible. We just get from the Bible. And the vertical view of a horizontal painting communicating the good news, Paul preaching in Athens. Okay. I mean, why didn't he just put it on the same page and then use that as the subscript? I don't know. And then here's the epilogue, which we're not going to read right now. And that's it. That's the book. To read this book again as an atheist is so different. When I was Christian and I hated evolution, I was the type of Christian that Hank was. I was so excited for this book because I thought, this is a slam dunk. How come everybody else doesn't see this? And that's kind of what we're left with at the end, where it says that, you know, this is so obviously crumbling. It's on its last legs. This is a corpse that we're marionetting around and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you and I have to tell other people this. You, dear reader, and I, we are the ones that have to do this. Well, if it was really that obvious, how come more people aren't coming to the same conclusion? And that was what I was kind of left wondering. You know, Hank, what I thought, he put all of this together in such an easy way, and golly, you know, if it's this obvious, then how can anybody believe in evolution? And I thought it was because of the devil. I thought it was because people hated God, that evolution was the only other alternative to Christian creationism, and that without evolution as their God, that these non-believers, these atheists, these lukewarm Christians who believe in evolution, these people are now having to come to terms with the fact that we do serve a good but fire and brimstone God, and that they don't want to come to terms with the fact that their way of life is going to kill them eternally. As an atheist, when I read this, it's very obvious why other people, including many other Christians, do not accept this. It's because Hank is a liar and he's a bad writer. The end. So I guess that I've come a long way, and I'm happy to know that. That when I read something, I don't just say, okay. I think about it. When I look at the footnotes, I don't just notice they exist, I check them out. And in some cases, I find the original and read from the original, which is something that Hank failed to do multiple times. So I'm glad that I read this. I don't want Hank to quote me, to say that at me as an atheist, that I'm glad that I read this, because yeah, I have come a long way, and that's awesome. So thank you, Hank, for that, and also for inspiring the kimchi Reuben, which I really hope that you guys try because it's super delicious. So with that being said, all the normal wrap-up stuff, like if you want to be a cult member, then you can join us here on YouTube as a YouTube member, or on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and you'll get early access to videos as well as updates and pictures and other things that are just for cult members, plus our monthly live stream, which is for the members only. You can also join us on Discord, great group of people, and of course that's totally free. And please, like, subscribe, post comments, and all of that stuff. But as always, guys, thanks for putting up with this, and thanks for listening.
Train up a child in the way they should go, and they shan't depart from it. Spare the rod for the child's what we're told. They want to justify being his. Children must obey their parents in all things. One as pleases the Lord. But is that all I can expect from my life? Constant submission till I'm floored. What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that feels. among his names, why is one of them jealous? What does that even mean? Why require our worship anyway? Why does he need anything? He is the potter and we are the clay. He does what he wills. It matters not what could we even do. It's his choice to save or kill. Why create this fuss system? Where's all the alleged wisdom? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? You tell us we're broken, to sell us pure, we're worthy as we are. What if I'm a doubting Thomas? Why refuse to reach out to us? If we are to seek the Lord, why does he hide of his own accord? Why give us brains to reason, but using them is highest treason? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken, to sell us pure, we're worthy as we are.